Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are brand new to this, so we've got about 200 people here. If you're brand new to this, let me give you a little walk around how this all works. You're probably in the attendee area. There's attendees and panelists. The difference between the attendees and the panelists showed up early. They had good audio, good video, and good internet. So they come in. We start at 6 o'clock. So we open up bright and early at 6 a.m. and it's pretty loose in the morning. We tell stories, we talk about it, we have our coffee or tea, and we kind of get moving. At 6:30, we distribute a Discord link. Discord is the Slack kind of Discord thing that we use. All the kids are using it these days. There's about 400 of us that use it all day between all these sessions. And if you want to join, you can come at 6:30 and get the link. It expires at 7. So once I'm doing this announcement, it's already expired. So you have to be here at 6:30 to get that link. And so that starts at 6:30. At 6:40, we start the mic checks. Once we've started the mic checks, if you come in and you see mic checks going on, we're not going to bring anybody else in. So you just need to know that once the mic checks begin, that's when we've kind of locked the panel. And then we start at 7. From 7 to 8, we have Q&A. So if you've got questions, you can put them in the Q&A area. A couple notes about the Q&A is don't put questions in the chat. That's for chatting. Or you can ask questions, but know that we're not going to talk about them inside of the panel. We'll do Q&A from 7 to 8 Pacific Standard Time. And then from 8 to 9, we have a special hour. Today's special hour, we're going to be talking to Thomas Kelly. He was formerly from the Obama media team in the White House. He's going to talk about what it takes to do media in the White House. We have a bonus hour at 9 to 10 today with Oliver Breidenbach, who's going to be talking about Mimo Live tips and tricks and answering your questions. And then Friday, our special hour is with Steve Brazil, who does concert photography. So he's going to talk about what it takes to shoot music concerts and his history around all of that. Then on Saturdays, we have a long day, 2 hours of Q&A. And then we have at 9 a.m. Nick Justin is going to talk about Unreal Engine. Steve Bays, former senior product manager from Final Cut, is going to be talking about deep cuts in Final Cut. I'm going to be talking about making motion graphics for live, and Aaron Mailer is going to talk about networking. So those are the things that are coming up. Again, if you're asking questions, make sure to keep them less than 5 lines. If they're longer than 5 lines, if they're a comment, or if they are more than one question in the same post, we're just going to dismiss them. So you just need to know that we're just not, don't take it personally. We just can't manage that flow. So start asking those questions as you start asking those questions as soon as you can. It's better to get in early. And then if you see a lot of questions in there, take a look at them. Especially if you're a participant, vote the questions up that you're interested in. That helps us prioritize what we should be asking next. So definitely use the up vote to push the questions that you're most interested in to the top. We usually get to the end of them just barely each day. So that's the way to manage that. Also, if you like what you see, if this is something that you think more people should come to, you can share the link. That's the link. Excuse me. That's the link that I just posted there, and so that you can share that anywhere you want. And we want to keep growing it. We're trying to figure out what we do with this post-COVID, but right now we're still in COVID, so we're able to keep on doing it. But we're trying to reach critical mass, which is a little bit bigger than what we have now. So, but we're having a lot of fun. Anyway, let's go ahead and start with the questions. Chris, what do we got?
First question, Hasmuk says he just received his ring light and he wants to know, what does Bi-Color and CRI mean on the settings?
Who wants to answer that? Does anyone? Okay, go ahead, Chris Summers, and then Bill, and then Kai.
I'll do it really simply so everyone else can go into full technical detail. Bi-color simply means tungsten or daylight balance, which means you're going to have a light that's going to do 3200 or 5600 color balance. And CRI, it's the color rendition index, is an attempt to standardize testing for lights so that there's, like you have, IP96 waterproof levels. This is an attempt to standardize categorizing lights and testing them so that.
And I'm going to jump to Guy,
but it's controversial.
What makes it controversial, Chris?
There's other standards. If you go online, you can read up on Wikipedia and other sources. There are other standards which have a higher regard. Let's say I'll let other people elaborate.
And the person that should elaborate here a little bit is Guy Cochran, because he sells lights. He makes them. So Guy, can you tell us a little bit about what goes into those two features, the Bi-Color and the CRI?
Sure. Early lights like the fluorescents had low CRI, and what happened was the skin tones just didn't look correct. I mean, you can fight it, and so when you get into post, you get into this big problem of that just doesn't look correct. And so over the years, the technology has gotten better and better, and we've gotten high CRI. So high CRI gave us accurate skin tone. So when you look at the vector scope, like on this chart, there's a flesh tone line, that line right there, and you should be able to hit it dead on if you have accurate lights. So when guys like Chris are on the set and they're looking and they have, airy lights or something high end, they're always going to get dead nuts on. And so you want to get just high quality lights, because you when you throw up your chip chart, you don't want to have grays that have a green spike or are just completely off. So it just makes your life a lot easier to get good lights. So there's some cheap ones, and then there's some decent ones, and there's some really great ones. I've had to pay a lot more. We manufacture our lights in China, and I've had to pay a lot more to get photo accurate bulbs, and it's been a real challenge to get them, because you want high CRI, and I have expensive meters where I actually go in there and test it. So when you're looking outdoors, sunlight is 100% CRI, 100 CRI dead on. So are tungsten lights. So the old Lowell lights that you might see around, those are also 100 CRI. So those are really accurate as well, even though they might be hot. I mean, today's technology is so awesome that we're not having to melt under lights. For those of you that are a little older, you remember having to bake and have air conditioning and all that stuff. But now with LEDs and fluorescents, it's so much nicer. Hope that answers that.
Yeah, and a lot of times, most of the lights that we get now are Bi-Color, or most of the ones that I get are Bi-Color as far as LEDs. And a lot of times there's two different colors that are there, and you're basically just scrolling which ones are more powerful than others. And the thing to remember is that what's interesting for a lot of these lights, it's actually brighter when you are somewhere in the middle than on either end, because you're using only half the lights or half the lights on either side. You're using a mixture of both of them in the center. Then it does two things. One is that they're slightly lower, and it also is a larger power consumption, when you're turning those all on. So which I've run into. Go ahead, Chris, and then Bill.
I was going to say it was kind of referenced briefly in Guy's chart. It's an interesting note that regardless of race, all flesh lands on that flesh tone chart. It was kind of referenced in the image that Guy zoomed in on. He's kind of zoomed past it. It's an interesting fact.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the practical thing for most people here who are doing this in an office or in your house or something like that is, if you have mixed lighting, and most people here do, where you've got some kind of artificial light source and then a window or something like that. This is why the window looks bluish and is often much brighter. It is very hard to beat the intensity of the sun. So you normally have to control windows or add a lot of artificial light on somebody to get a balanced exposure.
Well, and what's interesting is that I know when I got started, I didn't really see it. Like, I didn't see that. I didn't understand how these DPs could say, oh, there's a lot of, it's really warm or it's really cold, or, they're talking about temperatures. But once you get used to it, if you start really paying attention to it and look at out, your eye will start to distinguish between what it's looking at, and you'll start to realize that there's different colors coming, that are affecting everything. And so it's just, a lot of this is just eye training. Let's go to the next question.
Next question comes from Dave Node. He says, I'm streaming a urology conference in October, 2 to 3 rooms, 8 hours a day, low budget association. Recommendation for simple white label streaming provider.
I would say simple white label streaming provider is LiveStream. Does anyone, like white label, relatively simple to turn on? Leland, do you have any other opinions?
You can take a look at decast.com. I've been working with Greg Ellis over there quite a bit over the recent months. They seem to have a pretty reliable and decent product. It's got pay gates and its own video play out, so you can probably get it $19 a month to start that thing, I think. But if you're looking at business production, the enterprise level package is obviously in the hundreds, but take a peek.
Right. Yeah. And so, so that would be my opinion there. And Leland's. Grant, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Vimeo is an option because, and even though they're the same company, Livestream and Vimeo, if you enter from Vimeo, it's a different it's a different rate compared to live stream. They still are independent products. But I'd say if you've got very low user count, I used Wowzer Cloud for a long time. It's super cheap.
Yeah. So, well,
Not cheap when you get a lot of users, but if you haven't got a lot of users, it's very cheap.
right. You have to decide how many viewers, because it does get into a point where they're using Wowza Cloud or using AWS. One of the things that we're experimenting with a lot is when should we just do this on our own with AWS, where we kind of do our own thing. But Wowza Cloud, AWS, Elemental Cloud, or whatever you want, all those things, because you just got to look at how much are you paying per hour, and if it turns out that there's just not that many people, it may add up. It may not add up. It may be fine for you to do that in the distribution, but you do have to do that math. Once you get, I found that it's worth going to something external once you get to like 200 people. So, once you get over 200 people, I think that you're going to start paying more individually than you would if you just got a service to manage that for you. Because of course, and the other thing to remember is you just have to pay attention to whatever you're building on your own, what kind of peering relationship they have, which doesn't matter when you have a handful of people, but when you start having more people, it becomes an issue. So go ahead, Sky.
If you
Go ahead, Grant.
Norman Lear is my hero.
Hold on, Grant. Well, let's go back to Grant for just a second, and then Sky.
So I was just going to say, if you're doing on demand as well afterwards, Vimeo is so good for that. And then you get on your streaming package, you'll get 7 terabyte of storage of that. It's all white label. You can do a custom player if you want as well. It's a great solution.
It's easy. It's just easy to turn on, and they have some really interesting cross-platform solutions where you can build your own channel, and have VOD and live and everything else that I just want to publish to Apple TV and Android and phone and everything else and have my own little thing that does that. They'll build that for you. It's not at an expense, but they have really, I think more than anybody else, they've solved the turnkey, I want to be a media entity. And when I bought Livestream, I was like, I wonder how this is going to turn out. But I think that Vimeo did a really good job, and they've done a really good job. I didn't completely get it, like when they, get Vimeo for a long time, but I think that they have really found themselves a niche that they do really, really well. Sky?
Well, I may be out of time now, but Norman Lear is my hero at Follow the Funny. And I'm sorry, but urology conference?
Oh, I'm going to leave that to go. Everyone's got their conferences. Anyway, let's go to the next thing.
Rick Markley wants to know, what are everyone's thoughts on Zoom's recent announcement that they will not encrypt free calls and giving law enforcement access?
If you care about it, then pay for it.
Yeah. If you care about encryption, pay for it. I mean, I think that I love how people feel so entitled for something that they're not paying for. I'm sorry. Like, if you don't like it, go somewhere else. Like the thing is that you don't have a right to encryption, and there is, I think that there is a, if it's important to you, go find a service that does that, or pay a small amount of money per month to go over that. But we have to remember that there are security issues, with all of these things, and starting to give a whole bunch of people a secure video feed for free. The important part of paying for it, by the way, is not that you're paying for it. It's that you're attaching a credit card to the person owning the event. Like, that is the thing that's why that's important. It's not because they're trying to make more money. It's because they're forcing you to have a known person and they're to be accountable for the event. And when we're talking about exploitation, for in a variety of different ways, having encrypted communication with video is not a good idea. We just have to, we have to remember that, and we talk about security risks, exploitation, all kinds of other things that are there, in a group setting like this that can scale. There's all kinds of bad things that can happen. And so we just have to kind of keep track. But I don't think this is a money-making thing. This isn't a money-grabbing thing. It's a forcing you to identify yourself as a point, and then allowing law enforcement to make sure that's working. But if you think it's important to be encrypted, just put down a credit card. So I don't have but I think it's more about ID than about anything else. Does anyone have any other opinions about that? And I'm a big.
Sounds about right, and it's not surprising that they did this. They were probably under some pressure from law enforcement to do exactly.
And I think
that.
it's. I'll be honest with you. I think it's the right thing. It's reasonable to do that, in my opinion. So I'm not, and I'm a big, like my phone. I don't think that law enforcement has a right to, have a back door to my phone and have communication and everything else. But I think in general, we have to take into account that not everyone are good people. So there is we have to kind of take into account that a lot of bad things can happen. Yeah, go ahead, Annie.
Yeah, just, if you're getting a community behind whatever you're doing, it's there is a huge difference when people don't identify themselves versus when they do. Like, I've been in crypto communities for about 3 years. I've been on Telegram. You have no idea who you're talking about. And then, you can't even imagine being a woman in a crypto community in an, anonymous space. You can't even imagine the stories and the things that can happen. So, absolutely, I think it's, if you're not in a space where anonymity is the key kind of factor of driving the community, then this is a good idea, I think.
Well, and in general, this is why we push so hard for people's real names in Discord, people putting up their pictures in Discord. You can't be in this panel without actually doing the mic test. The mic test is as much about security as it is about testing your mics, because we let a lot of people in. And so there's a lot of things that we do to protect that environment. And so that, anonymity has its place. I'm not saying that anonymity isn't, but when you're trying to build a community, it's really important to take into account that when you know who people are, everyone acts better, because the people who are bad actors oftentimes won't show up because it's no fun. Felipe?
Well, I personally don't like anonymity, but I think there is a difference between being anonymous and having a private So I think it's not the same comparing anonymity with encryption or with the right for privacy. And my worry about Zoom doing this on the free version is that there are a lot of people that are not technically inclined and they're not doing something bad, but they're going to end up being target of not being taken in context. So that if there is a big search on an essay with keywords don't have context. The whole message before and after put that keyword in context. So that's my worry about
but that's not
encrypting.
Zoom. That's been an issue from day one since the NSA started doing that kind of filtering. And Zoom doesn't want to have liability. They're not a common carrier. They don't want to have liability for the events.
And for a lot of people using, the thing is also is if you're not willing to pay for it, you really want encryption, you're probably not someone's going to turn into a client anytime soon. And
yeah,
so
and if you don't know what a Title II common carrier is, then who cares?
Yeah. Anyway, so okay, let's go to the next question.
Tom Wineland says, I have a government client I do a lot of video for, and now they're exploring streaming. We're having a pre-production meeting, and I have an opportunity to ask questions. And I don't totally understand, but I think he's just trying to figure out what to ask, how to prepare best to do this. What are things, gotchas, he needs to watch out for?
I mean, if it's a virtual conference, you want to know how many people are connecting, where they're connecting from. Have they used any other platforms before, and what worked and what didn't work? So you want to kind of hear them out of if they're coming to you, and if they don't know, then that's fine. Does it need to be something that is private or is something that can be public? Do they want people to be on a public CDN, or do they want a white label, which means that it's going to only show up on their page and people can't go to the platform? So if you put up YouTube or something else, you're pushing out to their platform no matter what.
And how are the participants connecting, and what percentage of the viewers are going to be on mobile versus desktop?
Right, and
in terms of platform selection.
Right, and then we also look at do you want to have interaction with the audience? So like, are you going to have in that live air? And if they say we don't, we just want to present and go live. The question is really, should they go live if there's not any interaction with the audience? But the So you want to ask those things. Obviously, when is it happening? Where is it happening? Do they have good internet? Those are all things there. Again, do you have to put a security gate in front so that people can, and what level of security does that need to be? So are you going to keep people out? Those are all pieces of that puzzle. Go ahead, Elaine.
I think it goes back to call it salesmanship. Is you enter the meeting by asking questions and just simply, where are you at and what have you tried before? Because if you don't set those expectations, they may think that your $4,900 package is going to include, dishwasher services for the next 10 years. So I like to set expectation, and I do that by asking questions. And what have you guys tried before? Why do you want to do this? Who do you want to do it with and for?
Right. The main thing is just getting those specifics, though, because if you don't ask those questions, you won't have enough information to even kind of walk through it. Go ahead, Chris.
Asking questions and listening to the answers.
Asking those questions also give you an opportunity. I always tell people that if you just take a call and say, yes, I'll be there, I'll do this thing, you're not really selling anything. You're just taking an order, kind of like a drive-through at McDonald's. It's the kids at McDonald's that say, would you like a hot apple pie with that? They're actually selling.
Well, and beyond the selling part is really just making sure everything about live is what happens before you get to the event. So, the reason that my success rate tends to be pretty high is because I ask a lot of questions, probably a mind-numbing amount of questions about how we're going to do something. And when I'm doing this is how we're going to do your event, I'm thinking through every step. Like, how are we going to load in? Where are we going to get the internet? Where's the power? We literally send diagrams of our desks. Like, we need a 30 by 20 space or whatever that space is. I need this many drops of 20 amp, whatever. And you think about all those things, because number one is the more you think about those things and the more you press down on requiring those things, beforehand, or you tell them, if I don't have these things, bad things can happen. Those are a lot of CYA / get it. But a lot of it isn't so much my ability to get events done it has less to do with my ability to do something on site and more my ability to press logistics, and making sure that we get there early enough, that we have a load in time that makes sense, but also to understand all the bits and pieces of what the client expects. So there's a sales piece of that, but there's also just trying to hoover up as much information about what they expect and what live streams have they seen that they like. So you get a sense of, because when they say that, they thought of something. Like, this is a live stream that I want to do one like that. And so then you get a real quick sense. If they don't know how to answer your questions, asking what live streams they've seen that they want it to be like, oftentimes can give you a really clear picture of what their expectation is going to be. All right, let's go to the next question.
Elliot Murphy, the keeper of the Lufts this morning, says that when he's running vMix in AWS, is there a remote desktop application that works with a little less lag than the built-in remote desktop?
Leland.
I'm going to leave a link in the chat to vMix's overall recommendations, which they have tried. They don't ever recommend the remote desktop that's available, of course, the RDP. We're going to give Splashtop a run. There's also AnyDesk and, of course, TeamViewer. They're all capable of handling that switching, but we're going to be testing the waters on a few of them and see exactly which ones have the least amount of latency and see where it goes from there.
And Leland, you're coming in a little low.
I'm sorry, that's probably mic location, but thanks.
Okay. Phil?
Yeah, and one other to add to that list, Tucker and I were doing some tests on a new player called Parsec, which is aimed at video game control. So players remotely playing video games has a really tight latency. I don't have any grade or qualification on it yet, but it's a contender and it's totally free, which I know Alex doesn't always like, but for now it's an interesting technology to check out.
I think free is great to experiment with. I just don't like putting too much weight on it because I just never know how long they're going to last.
Right.
So
that's always sort of a Teams version that you can pay for. So they do have some kind of business model in mind.
If there's a business model, it's fine. As soon as I realize what the business model is, then I'm like, okay, as long as there's cash coming in. But if it's just investment of hey, we're going to get a bunch of users, sometimes I worry that I'm going to build a pipeline around something that disappears. Next question.
I think Grant's trying to spend some of that money he's making with Blue, but he wants to buy a new MacBook Pro 16-inch, and he doesn't know if he wants the i7 or the i9.
i9.
i9,
i9
straight up.
done. Right hand
Always go
column.
for the top spec device when buying a
Right hand column. Check everything on the way down, Grant. That's
Not
it.
not always. I wouldn't say
about
that.
money. It's not about money because there's been some comparisons about video encoding, and
Okay.
I think it's sorted out in software now. I think it was all a bit like at the end of last year, but there was some that were saying that the i9 was underperforming a lot and the i7 was doing way better.
They were having
it's turned
thermal
around now.
threshold issues, as you described. Yeah.
I think it's
kept the
turned around now,
i9
and
operating at a lower clock speed than the i7. I think they fixed that though, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think it's running cooler as well, and the fan, the fan doesn't have to run as hard. There's less power and all of that. So I think it was i9, but
I've been thinking about if for my laptop, I was building like a water cooled, something that circulates cold water like underneath, not against it.
You're gonna build that with Legos?
Yeah, I'm gonna build it with Legos. It'd be great. Yashai, and then Jan.
Okay, let me just clarify the new MacBook Pro 16. They redesigned the whole thermal path, so they don't have any more limitation for the thermal path. The difference between the i9 and the i7 is the core count. So the i7 will give you 6 core as opposed to 8 core. I will put the money first on additional RAM and the highest GPU, especially if you do editing, and then I'll go to the core count between iCore 9 and iCore 7. So this is the priority. First, either GPU, RAM, and then the iCore 7.
So I was thinking 32 gig. Do you think that's really a massive?
32 gig is perfect. People did some testing with high rendering. They didn't even reach that. And especially Apple right now know how to compress the RAM in such a way, very efficient. If you look at the stats while it's working, you'll see. But if you can, I'll get 64 if you buy it for a long time. Yeah.
I'm going to jump to Alex real quick just because he deals with a lot of this. Go ahead, Alex.
I mean, I would say that it's very, very easy to say, I bought this 16-inch MacBook Pro in 2016 and just set it all levels to 11 on everything. But some people don't have the cash to do that. And also sometimes the $200 extra or $400 extra isn't actually worth it. Certainly, I would say if you spend most of your time doing video editing, you don't really need more than 16 gig, although it feels really weird not to ask for it because you think, hey, I'm a experienced professional. I need 16 gig, 32 gig, but 16 is fine because really it's the speed of your SSD that counts because it's actually how much of the stuff you have in memory at once. And it's quite rare that you're compositing too much at the same time in RAM.
Now, the one thing I'll say is
gig.
that for if you're only doing video, yes. The issue is you're buying a computer that you're going to do theoretically for a bunch of things, including I still strongly believe that 3D is going to be a bigger deal for a lot of us as we go into the not too distant future. And so I think being able to, that's where the RAM high polygon counts and so on and so forth are going to mean something to us, whether we have used it in the past or not. And so, and processing that, I think is going to be more important. So I think more 32, that's the argument for 32, not for necessarily 64, which I think is pretty heavy.
I mean, I would say that my order of preference is GPU power, where then that includes GPU RAM, then SSD speed. And sometimes you get your 2 terabyte drive is a lot faster than your 1 terabyte drive with the SSDs. You look at the tests. And then later on RAM. So that's just my order, if you see what I mean, because obviously people have different amounts of cash and some people can't afford everything.
Jan?
Yeah, I bought the 16-inch and I've got the 2.3 and the i9 with 16 gigs. And I find that it's slower than my old machine, my 2014 machine, which didn't have an i9. Does anybody have any ideas on how I could speed it up a little bit?
Did you migrate from your older profile or did you start it new?
Started new. I started new. I didn't want any of the old stuff because of the difference in the 64 and the 32.
I can't think of a single reason how that's possible.
Yeah,
unless you have some thermal issues.
Yeah, but otherwise I don't know. Go ahead, Victor.
Just keep in mind these machines are not upgradable. So what you buy is what you buy. So it's not like you can go in there and upgrade it. That's important.
I will say that I've kept machines a lot longer because I bought the beefiest thing that I had, and then I slow down my upgrade path slows down because I can run it for a lot longer than I can if I bought just what I needed today. In that process, because I remember when we saw 32 gigs and we were like, what would you ever do with 32 gigs of RAM? And now there's processes that I do on my iMac that have 32 gigs of RAM and or that has 32 gigs of RAM, and I run out of RAM. Like it's just like you're out. Not the RAM, the RAM cache, everything. It just goes and you're done. We can't go any further. We can't draw this for you. Anyway, so next question.
Next question is Bob Middleton. He says, I'd be interested to hear the panelists' thoughts on where the major filmmaking industry areas are in the US and other parts of the world in regards to current and new emerging employment opportunities. And I would add on to that, how much of the growth in various areas of production is based on tax incentives by those states?
Chris? Go ahead, Chris.
Tax. You've hit the nail on the head there, Chris.
Yeah.
It's all about tax. From my colleagues that are in the States, Los Angeles seems to be heavily TV based at the moment. All the feature film work has gone to Atlanta. That's a lot of people are moving to Atlanta. New York is seems to be very closed. For the people that like the job that I do, there's like you can count on two hands the top people that work there, and they keep it sort of that way. I talk about feature films now, not broadcast. In terms of Europe, it's all about the tax. The reason I've been in Hungary for so long is they've got a up to 32.5% tax rebate, and it's uncapped, and that includes the post-production work. You compare that to a place like South Africa where it's 25% and it's capped at something like a few $1 million, where if you have a budget of 150 million, they're just not going to go there.
Right.
Eastern Europe, and at the moment the UK is huge. If you look at what's happening in Pinewood, Disney has taken over Pinewood Studios for the next sort of 5 years at a minimum. Netflix has taken out Shepperton Studios, 14 stages for at least 5 years. So there's things happening.
Sky?
Yeah, Canada also invested heavily, but they're also very closed that unless you're very specialized, you don't get in because they are doing it for their own people. Vancouver, and I know Toronto did some big build outs as well. But again, if you're Canadian, you might be able to get into the industry.
Southern Alberta has been pushing for video a lot. There was a lot of Western turn there too. So I think there's some major tax incentive across
Calgary,
not just this country, all
over
over the world.
It's a tax
and
incentive.
Montreal for special effects.
Brandon and then Leland.
Just one more to throw on that list is Denmark. The demand for Danish kind of like moody television series is so unprecedented that they are desperately hiring crews of all sorts.
And then Leland?
Yeah, we're getting the same effect here in Michigan, actually. There have been incentives pushed a lot into the cinematic territories. They filmed a lot of the scenes from Transformers last night here, just about 20 minutes down the road from us on M52.
And Leland, you're really low. It's hard to hear you.
I'm sorry.
So you got to fix that. So the and the thing to remember also is that I think that as we look at employment opportunities, I would also consider film as one place to do that, but one place to, as you're looking at where can I go, just remember that a lot of corporations and educational organizations and everything else are going to be looking for a lot more content, especially now. There is an enormous push down this path, and I think that you're going to see now that companies can't, they don't have conferences, and so they're trying to figure out how they stream. What I think this is going to do is build a capacity to do channels. You know, the companies are going to start building channels. They're going to realize that conferences doesn't make any sense anymore. You know, like they haven't figured that out quite yet. They're working on it, but they're going to figure out that conferences don't make any sense and that they need an ongoing content stream. And as they do that, it's not that everyone's going to want to watch that company's thing, but if we're really interested in that information, as users, whether it's fishing gear or small business or whatever that is, at some point we run out of time. We won't run out of time, the amount of time we can watch and the amount of time we can absorb. And I think that's going to impact the entire industry. So basically, I think that the lower 50% of all broadcast is at risk. Like the lower, the lower budget stuff in broadcast is at risk, maybe the lower 75%, because there's all these people that are going to start watching their own little niches that may only have a couple 100,000 viewers, but that's enough. And it's spread over everyone. That goes a long way. Go ahead, Annie, and then Chris, and then we'll move on.
So I was reading an article today. It was a research which was saying that about 86% of people who are going to conferences, they go there mainly for networking. So I think that is going to be like the main element that we have to incorporate somehow in the virtual events, because that's the, the core important thing that people go there for, because otherwise
I agree.
You will watch a YouTube broadcast and
that's also why you have to extend it so it's a constant interaction. If you look at what we're doing here, we have a lot of people that are getting to know each other both here and in Discord, and we know each other deeper than we'd ever know each other running into each other if we met each other at NAB, and handed each other cards, we would not have the same relationship that we have together now, as a group. And so finding ways to have constant interaction changes that math, and I think it's actually far superior to the conference. The conference is, for the vendors, for the people that are going, and also for the inclusion. Conferences exclude 2/3 of the world typically. They just can't be part of this conversation. And so as we can figure out how to make it more virtual, I think we end up in a different space. Go ahead, Chris, and then we'll move on.
I will yield my time for the sake of a better segue and move on to Gabriel's question. As a live streaming service, I like what Alex says, that we need to not just sell an experience. No, that we need to sell an experience and not just flipping an on switch. What are examples of ways to enhance that experience, what we were just talking about, or viewer engagement ranging from small to large budget clients? So how can we do that? What are the things we can do as not just a streaming service, but as somebody to enhance the whole thing?
Well, I think that the number one thing that we discuss with folks is incorporating the audience. So how do you include the audience in the conversation? And I think that we're going to see people get better at that, and better tools are coming out and everything else. As people get good at that, the participatory content is going to become a much, much bigger deal. If you look at TikTok versus Quibi is we're going to make short content that everyone can watch. TikTok is we're going to make content that everybody can make. So and that is and you should look at how the TikTok thing keeps on moving, because what you have is people able to riff off of each other because of the fact that they're not locking down in copyright. People are able to say, I'm going to take your audio or your video and I'm going to make something else with it, and I'm going to take it and show what my life looks like based on that thing, right? And that group thought, and that's a one version of participatory video, but figuring out ways that the audience can be part of the thing is the number one thing I think you can do for a live stream. I think that there's only 3 reasons to go live, and that is you're doing breaking news, you have sports, or audience interaction. There is an argument, maybe the fourth one would be a soft fourth, is that everyone experiences the same thing at the same time, but that's still audience interaction because they're interacting with each other. But you want to find ways to, but if you don't figure out a way to do that, if it's just a dumb stream going out, I don't think that, unless it's $75,000 a minute on Netflix or hundreds of thousands of dollars a minute on Apple, I don't think you're competitive, on a dumb stream out in 5 years. Sky.
A non-technology answer is, because technology is going to constantly change. The last 3 years of my life has been understanding story first. And I know you're Alex, a big proponent of having a script, and it all starts with a good story. So somehow the engagement, the inaction, the empathy, the hero's journey, has something to do with our tribal anthropological connected around a fireplace, a fire pit.
Right. But I think that the story really has to include the audience. And that's the thing that I think that we're not, we think a lot about how we're going to tell something, but we have to figure out how that new form of content, which is just in its early stages, that we're experimenting with here. I mean, we've got, a bunch of people that are all having this conversation, and they're interacting in the chat. They're asking questions. We're all talking, but this isn't the future, but this is an arrow towards it. That we're going somewhere in this direction. Go ahead, Grant.
Happy to be in your petri dish.
Oh, well, thanks, Grant.
Yeah, I've played around with interaction a bit, because I've done live podcasts and stuff, and interacted with people even just through text. And so I think to get to that question of budget, even just with text feedback that you get from your audience, if you can engage with them right up front, very, very early, if you can welcome people by name and you can answer a few questions right up front at the start of your show, it tells everybody that that you're taking notice of them, and then it generates more and more.
And we try to remind people, like, don't ask for questions right before you want them. Cue immediately that you're going to take questions. And you'll notice that in our show, at the beginning of every show, I tell you, put the questions in. This is how we want them. This is what we're going to go through. We're reminding people all the time that we're going to work through those questions. And so it's super important to have that communication. We find that, for instance, I can measure if someone uses an iPad that we're sending questions to, if they pick up the iPad and make sure that it's in the camera shot and they're looking down, we see spikes in viewership, like literally, and engagement, because people realize that they're getting cued all the time. And it's also why it's so important to have repeating events. That's why conferences are a waste of time, because it is a single event that happens over 3 days. People barely get their wits about them. If you have an event every week, I talk about this with clients all the time. I'm just like, I've said this, I don't know how many times now, but in this course, but you are no longer constrained by time and space. You do not have to do this in a specific place, and you do not have to do it over a constrained amount of time. You can stretch your communication out, and what that does is it allows the audience to gel. It allows them to learn how you're going to interact with them. It allows them to think about it in between. And if you build something like we have Discord, it allows them to talk to each other during the event, and that's a really, really powerful thing to consider. Chris, go ahead, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, so this is a pretty big thing for us, because for the last 3 days we've had meetings on. We have a certain amount of trade shows we go to each year for the products we make. Those all got shut down this year. So while those people aren't spending money or taking the time to go to those things, what we're going to do is we're renting a space at our office, setting up our trade show booth, and then we are trying to figure out how we can run a real-time meeting during those same date times that everybody can be watching us.
But I would just stop with the whole certain time. Like, figure out how you stretch
this would
it
be
all out.
like a once a week event for us.
Oh yeah. No, that's it. And the thing is that I firmly believe that if every company took the budget that they had for these trade shows and applied it to virtual events, they would never go back. It would be the end of conferences as we know it, because they would realize that they've been pouring money into this hole. Now, because what we see a lot of companies doing is, well, how can I do it for $10? How can I do that? How can I save 90%? Because now it's online. There's no physical parts. But, the thing that we try to explain to people is that if you've got 1,000 people in the room, how many people do you have supporting that 1,000 people? You have 100 people, 50 to 100 people that are all, managing what they're doing and everything else. Yeah. If you have that, you're not going to go from 50 or 100 people down to 2 that are trying to run your webinar. You should be thinking about, how do I get down to 25 or 30 that are making that a great experience. And so that's the thing you want to that's what we see a lot of people doing, is trying to leverage that. But you can add a lot of, if you look at the stuff that Grant and Blue are doing, they're building this great experience for people that they can seamlessly come in. And those are all the things that we built for physical events. They're just still pretty rocky for virtual events. And ironing that out is really important. Okay, Chris, next question. We're going to start moving really fast for everybody, because this is the time where we start getting to the speed round. Speed round. All right, here we go.
I'm building a new PC after buying an iPhone SE and transferring all the files and settings. I'm looking for an application for Windows that can do the same thing. Any suggestion? No, that's the Mac ecosystem.
There are a few, but none of them are great.
Is he moving data from an Apple to a PC, or just looking for a solution for something?
I don't quite understand the question.
I think the question, this is what I'm hearing, but I'm a Mac fanboy. Michael Tucker bought it, has an iPhone. He liked the way it could connect to the Mac, but now he's building a PC and he wants the same functionality.
For
That's what I'm
Ghost
hearing.
cloning software. Ghost cloning software is usually available on most backup applications to allow you to transfer a full drive over to some other.
You can transfer a full drive. You'll never have the interaction that you're expecting. There. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm still
He
unclear.
wants a
on
PC version of Migration Assistant, basically, and Migration Assistant does that brilliant on the Apple side. I don't know if anything on the PC side does.
Now,
so.
the thing to keep in mind with a PC is you don't have a central repository of your user data, with the exception of the user data folder in your user profile folder. So on the Mac side, you the same folder, the comparable folder would be the library folder inside your user home directory. In there, you'll find application support, which will contain a lot of your application data as well as a few libraries. But you'll find a lot of application data and settings stored there. More settings than data.
The short version is
the point here is that it's
work.
all centrally located.
Yep.
And you can
we got to
with a
speed
single
round. We got to go. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
Joe Wasser
not as hard as it
says.
sounds. That's it.
Joe Wasser says, when do you all think about audio? I hear a lot of talk about video, but very little talk about audio. That's not really true. Do you have
You're
an
not in
audio person on
Discord.
site? Yeah. Do you have an audio person on site when you're doing a live show? Yes.
Well, we constantly tell our clients, and we've talked about it here quite a few times, that audio is more important than video. It's why there's a whole day, every Tuesday we're talking about some version of something about audio. Audio is more important than video, and we definitely talk. What we answer is questions about whatever shows up. So that's why we talk more about videos, because people ask more about video. But we definitely have a lot of conversations about audio, and we will continue to deepen that. But it is the quality of someone can watch bad video for a long time. They cannot listen to bad audio for very long. So it's definitely the priority. Yashai, and then we're moving on to the next question.
Especially if you go on site and if you're doing video and a bunch of stuff, you definitely need a dedicated audio guys. And especially if you're running Wi-Fi wireless, you need to scan channels. Yeah. You need to make sure everything, staging all the level and everything. You have to have on-site audio.
And the one thing that I will say is that you don't have to necessarily have them on site all the time with virtual events. Brian runs audio for me from his house. And so it's a matter of building that architecture, and he's setting up all of our comms. He's setting up the, all the routing, all the levels, everything is all being set up from his house in Savannah, Georgia, while I'm in San Francisco. And so, so it doesn't have to be something that's on site anymore. Definitely the key roles that I get really, I can crew. When I say crew, it means you hire somebody to just find a bunch of people for you. I'll have a lead camera, lead audio, technical director. When I say technical director, I mean vision mixer, and a good EIC, along with my producer. Those are that's the backbone of my production. And then I can fill in around that pretty quickly. But you have to have someone really strong that's going to cut the show, that understands the video pipeline, an EIC that's going to be able to tie it all together, a great audio engineer. Those are the things that that have to, and one really good camera person that you trust to set the cameras and work with the camera operators, and then after that you can, and a producer obviously, and then after that, an EIC is an engineer in charge. So that's the person that kind of Marty. When you see Marty's been my EIC for a long time. So someone who really knows a lot about everything that kind of ties it all together. But those 5 people are my backbone for shows. And then after that, you can put a lot, obviously we try to put A level at every position, but when we need to crew something locally, we can kind of go down that path. Grant,
what's your role, Alex? What's your role in that?
Innocent bystander. Literally, I have that. I have the, it's either complainer in chief or innocent bystander are the 2 roles that I usually take. I try to stay away from being the hands-on producer on an event, but a lot of times what I do is I show up because a lot of our clients feel more comfortable when I'm there. And then I poke at things. I'm the other person that's kind of listening to stuff and telling Brian, hey, I hear something that he may be in the weeds looking at. So he's like working on something, and I go, I hear a little buzz on channel 8, or I hear this thing. And so I'm a pretty technical person that can sit there and look at video and audio and everything else. So the goal is not have me in the weeds, but have me just kind of floating around. But I look at things from both the technical as well as the logistics. So when I'm there, I've had situations where I'm looking at things that'll affect us that aren't our job, but I know that it'll affect us. So for instance, we were doing an event in Chicago where they're laying down this really complex floor, and they're not making their timelines, and I know that them not getting their timelines means I'm not going to have enough time to set cameras the next day for the event. So the thing is that I'm looking at that. So now, and my team is just working on what they're working on, but I'm floating around talking to the client and talking to the vendor, and then causing trouble, telling the client that the vendor's going to have to pull an all-nighter to be ready at 8 o'clock. That's what's going to have to happen for this for this event to turn out, and then having them press down on the vendor to have that floor get built on time, which doesn't necessarily make you a lot of friends, but I'm protecting my show because what will happen is that floor will be done and the client will see it done. But I'm rushing around now with my cameras because I wasn't able to do it. So I get blamed for not being ready, and so you have to look at logistics, your horizon of events. You have to look at how all those things are going to piece together and how they're going to affect you sometimes days away.
So are you the executive producer, the line producer?
I guess we always give executive producer, we always tell people they're executive producer when that just means that they get to sit around and talk. So I'm probably a little bit more, I'm probably closer to a line producer, I guess, is that I don't really care about roles. Like I don't care what my name, what I'm called. So I'm just usually the guy that shows up and does and causes trouble. So anyway, let's go to the next question. We got to go a little faster. That was a meaty question, so we jumped into it. But let's try to get through the next 5.
LiveU, Solo SDI, or Terradeck Vidu, I don't know how to pronounce it. Vidu Go for streaming from the field. Pros and cons for each. I'm struggling to decide.
I think fundamentally they're not that much different once you're dealing with a single connection. I think that the LiveU in general, the LiveU platform is more stable than the Terradeck platform, in my opinion. We just have a lot more issues. We use a lot of Teradecks. I mean, I use a lot of bolts, and I use I've had cubes for a long time to move things around for monitoring, but I haven't put that many Teradecks into signal path, because there's lots of little setup things that sometimes become a little tweaky. And then I know some people who do, but I don't. And then admittedly, I only put LiveU into signal paths I only put cellular into signal paths when it's an emergency, like when I don't have any other option. But those are, I think that LiveU, I would say, wins by a nose, but it's not a massive difference between the two, in my opinion. Any other opinions quickly?
I just wanted to follow up on the question a little bit, Alex. How many backups, non-cellular backups, would you put in place before you would consider cellular backup as an option?
Cellular is oftentimes the second. On a smaller event, cellular is my backup to my sat truck. That's the kind of, and I may take that cellular and connect it to an Ethernet or Wi-Fi if I can. LiveU's let you kind of grab onto things, and so I may grab a couple of those. So 2 ways out is kind of what I consider my minimum. I want 2 diverse outs out of a location on a high profile event, and if I think that there's going to be more than a couple million people watching, then it's 4 ways out. So it's, I want the switch, I want a satellite truck, I want the local internet at like a gig line, and I want a LiveU, coming out of it. And those are the 4 ways out. And I've never gotten all in a 4-way out. I've never gotten all the way to 4, but I have gotten to number 3. So, anyway, so that's, it can, those are, but that you set up 4 ways out on really, really high profile events. Go ahead, Chris.
Just curious, having multiple options, do you think you switched to the backup before you could have fixed the primary, or did you go to the backup because you had the backup?
Well, you're going to the backup because you're going to the backup because you see frame loss. So you're, if you see frame loss, you immediately switch to the backup. Like you just
got it.
Just
so you're
over,
switching. You're switching for quality, not for like one channel was terminated.
No. Usually it's like something starts to break up, or there's some audio issue, or there's some kind of whatever, and you're going, okay, we'll get to the backup, and you try to test each one. You try to treat each one like a primary, and then you try to make sure it's all working. But what we have is, like satellite is a good example. Satellite starts to break up, you move to the LiveU really quickly because that means that the satellite's getting rain fade. It might be, that might be the issue. Or we had one we had one where a helicopter flew between our satellite truck and the satellite. Like what are the chances? You know, and so the, you know, like it
happens to
just like
everyone once.
Yeah, like everybody, you do enough satellite trucks, you'll get that. Brian, and then we'll move on.
This is just a real quick thought, but when you're using, if you have more than two somethings, if you have more than one backup, don't make your last backup your flakiest thing that you have. Because if you get to the flakiest thing you have and that's all you have, it's a very bad feeling.
Right. Yeah. So you want to treat each one like that could be your primary, you know, and the one thing to know though is that there are going to be quality and sync issues. And if you send a primary and a backup to something like YouTube, for instance, it is not switching over when something goes wrong with A. It's making a decision about the entire ingest path all the way to the glass, which means that some percentage of your viewers will be watching your backup. So if you're doing a primary and a backup to YouTube, for instance, specifically, it's making that decision in the cloud based on a lot of other transport issues other than your ingest. And so you just have to remember that your backup is not truly a backup, like it's only going to go there if your primary breaks up. It might be sending 30, 40, 50% of the folks to your backup because there's some kind of congestion inside of YouTube. So you just have to remember that you really have to respect your primary and backup paths. Go ahead, Chris. Next question.
AJA HELO versus Matrox Monarch HDX for streaming, or anything better for under $1,500.
Well, the thing that we're testing a lot right now is the link. So this is the AWS link that, you know,
are those
for that,
really transparent? Because every time you
look,
hold it up,
see,
it seems very transparent.
it's so cloud. If you look at this, it is so cloud that it's not actually here.
I wouldn't think orange would be a problem. What is that with that key? Can we just jump to that?
So that's
my real question of the day.
Yellow and the green.
Okay.
This is the shortcoming of my key. So if I turn it off, you can see there's the box, but then it's in the cloud. Anyway, so you know, that's the thing that we're kind of moving towards for a lot of the stuff we're doing. If you don't want to go through AWS to do that, then I don't really have I don't have a lot of other solutions that I'm happy with. So but I haven't used the Monarch or the HELO for a long time. I did use them when they first came out. Monarch's been out for a long time, and it was painful when it came out. I was super excited about both of them, and then I watched it. Oh, it's okay. But I don't have a strong opinion between the two. But I think that what I like about the link is that if you get into AWS, you just turn it on and it appears. It's there. You know, you buy it through your AWS thing, and then it just appears, and then you can reroute. You know, and do a lot of the things that you could do there. So. Next question. We got to move
Jeff
fast.
Bates is trying to transcode XDCAM EX35 to H.264 at 8 megabits. He wants to know how much faster a GPU will make that process happen.
Depends on your bit rate.
Yeah, you shy?
Yeah, I think it's you need a little more information to answer correctly this this question. The thing is, first, each NLE handle the GPU differently, and sometimes they give more weight to the CPU as opposed to the GPU, and sometimes you buy this GPU and you see no different, and sometimes the internal GPU is so good. So I think it's really important to really understand the NLE and how they handle all the GPU
or the compressing, whether it's you know, so whether you're using compressor or media encoder, or you know, those are all, you know, it depends on what you're using to compress and whether it leverages the GPU or not. I do believe compressor does do a fair bit of that. I think it just, but I'm not entirely sure. I know that it's
sometimes they're different in different codec. They do different things. You know, it's a.
Yep, absolutely. Leland?
Just a couple things that might help. I left a couple of links to Pomfret for where you're going to really want to look at using GPU over CPU. It's mostly with regards to raw or compressed video formats. And also along that line, we're playing around with some systems that have been built recently in the blockchain to acquire access to a lot of the GPUs that are currently mining and use that. If you look at livepeer.com, I've been speaking with the CTO over there, Peter Tang, who introduced us to the idea of using all the collaborative assets that are out there in GPU processing to transcode video online. So we're going to look into that and see how it works. If anybody wants to test it out, let us know.
Sounds good. Chris, next question.
I'm going to skip over Jeff Francis's question. We kind of talked about that. It's a big thing. So jumping down to Christian, I've heard you guys speak about iGlasses for Mac OS. What is a good equivalent on Windows? I came across Webcamoid.
That comes up that comes up about once a week, and I don't think we have a strong solution on the PC side for that. Logitech used to have some software. There's Logitech Capture, but I don't think that's the same really. I think it's for the Logitech cameras, but yeah, we don't have a strong solution, and
it's only for the Logitech cameras for Logitech.
Yeah.
capture.
So now we're going to shift gears. So we have finished our Q&A, and so we're now going to shift gears here, and I am excited to introduce Thomas Kelly. Thomas Kelly worked in the Obama administration in the White House, and we got to know each other because I was doing jobs there. So
time to say bye to YouTube.
Oh yeah, we'll say goodbye to thanks to everyone on YouTube. Everyone wave. Bye YouTube.
Bye YouTube.